Dad was an amazing person in a lot of respects. I mean, he came up with this idea, for a dog. He had the smarts to keep it going, to make it bigger.
Dad was an innovator in what he did when he did it, and he and Mom together had a lot of courage to do that.
When Dad started this business, he took a tremendous challenge, but I think the risk and the challenge to him was critical because that's his nature. He was an entrepreneur, but I think he was supremely confident that no matter what he did in pursuing the dream, he would take care of the family.
He never thought the company would get as large as it did. And we always joke that he wanted to start a company to make sure all his kids had a job.
When I think about Dad, I think about how much the business meant to him, but it was never in order to create wealth, or it was never in order to gain some material possession, it was never in order to get a status. It was what he liked to do.
He had a dream, and he and Mom focused on that dream until they got to the point where they thought the dream came true.
And the success that came from that is where he got his satisfaction.
He was always so concerned about the employees, and he tried to take good care of them.
He loved his customers and he loved his suppliers, but he really gained strength out of his employees.
I always remember my dad talking about the type of people that he was able to hire by staying in Mount Sterling, the people that had the same values as that we had and the same work ethic. You could always count on the people who helped run the business.
He was very conscious of the family of employees, if you will. And up until the very end, I think he knew all of them by their first name.
Dad felt like everybody had a role to play, and all roles are critical, and because it all plays a part in serving the customer in one shape or form. And I think he had a great appreciation for everybody at every level.
He could walk up to any employee in the business on a consistent basis. He always made everybody feel as if their contribution was important, and it is.
Dad had the best smile, and I love my dad's laugh, but he was always looking at that watch.
With Dad, if you weren't early, you were late.
He was always early for everything he did, and if you were anywhere near to being on time, you were late.
A big thing was just being late for dinner. It was, this is dinner and you need to be here. And the church bell rang and we all ran home from wherever we were to eat dinner, and if you were late, you're in big trouble. And so, but he did that for Mom, and I look back at that and I think that was really sweet.
He was never late for a meeting that I know of, and usually early, and certainly he was that way with deliveries, and that's why the business is successful. He would entertain a lot. Dad was a big entertainer. Entertain customers, friends, himself.
And he liked to have fun.
But no matter how late the entertainment went the night before, he would be up, making his rounds, checking on things. 5:30, 4, 5 in the morning.
We call it running the traps. He had his own little schedule of taking the mail, going out and seeing the garage employees early, running through the office. He had his own routine. He was a creature of habit.
We used to make fun of Dad about being the official light turner, honor, and offer around here. And that was one example of many of how he looked after the little things to keep our costs down.
When we were dating, we talked about having a big family, and I was all for it. And he really wanted a football team, so I think I did one more than that.
He was there for you. I mean, you knew. He would figure it out.
All he wanted to do was solve problems, and he loved doing that. And believe me, with all his kids growing up and getting into the teenage years and their friends coming, I mean, he had plenty of problems to solve.
Dad was number one. He was such a straight shooter. I mean, if Dad said something, that was the way it was.
What he said was what he was going to do.
You know, there's lots of words that describe Dad. Gruff being the first one, impatient.
Pat and I and Ray Renlund were out fishing in the Mississippi River over near Hannibal, and Pat or I were having trouble casting with a particular rod. And rather than, you know, kind of work with us, show us, you know, Dad said, let me show you how to do this. So he grabs it from one of us and he goes like this, and it slips out of his hand. Rod, reel, bait, I mean, everything goes sailing into the deepest part of the Mississippi River, right there. But that would be Dad's, you know, typical teaching style.
I like to tell people Dad was a walking series of contradictions.
He used to act like he didn't like dogs, and he used to tell people publicly, you know, don't bring the damn dog around here. And then privately, you'd see him snuggling up to the dog and feeding the dog and taking care of it.
He was outwardly gruff, abrupt.
He had a gruff voice. He was very short. He would say a sentence and you're supposed to know not only the paragraph, but the chapter. And if you didn't follow his train of thought, you were in trouble.
We used to call it RT speak, which meant short words that, you know, he felt like you should understand, which really had meanings of sentences.
He could be a little gruff sometimes, you know. Some people, you know, I think are kind of scared of him at times, you know.
And then you contradict that with, Dad had one of the biggest hearts that you've ever seen. He was one of the most generous people that you could ever imagine.
I keep hearing stories that go back to RT in his early days. RT was very well known to do things behind the scenes. At his funeral, we heard many stories about, you know, direct stories from people impacted by this, of things that he did for them or for their family that nobody had ever heard of before.
Everyone that knew him honestly knew that, you know, he was such a compassionate man. There was nobody that had a bigger heart than Dad.
Dad was, well, he was a special guy in all respects. Mentioned humility. He was very humble as a person. Yet he was charismatic. People just naturally sought to follow him.
He was somebody you could count on, and he was honest and trustworthy, and that's Dad.
He was honest and sincere.
Loyal, committed, caring.
Dad was just he was a great man. We're very, very lucky.